It was an unusually crisp morning at Pineview Animal Shelter, a place where the hum of fluorescent lights seemed to match the monotony of the daily routines. This shelter, though clean and well-maintained, carried an air of emotional coldness, a place where animals waited for a second chance that never seemed to come. The walls, lined with kennels, housed dogs of all shapes, sizes, and ages, each one vying for attention, each one hoping for a home that might never open its door. But in the farthest corner of the shelter, tucked between a row of younger, more energetic dogs, there lay an old German shepherd who had long been forgotten by the world. His name was Chief. With a graying coat that spoke of age and a pair of weary golden eyes, Chief had been here for over 16 months. It was hard to remember a time when he wasn't just another fixture of the shelter. He had been passed by countless visitors, none of them ever giving him more than a passing glance. Chief never barked, never ran to the front of his kennel to greet people the way the other dogs did. He simply lay there, still, his eyes following the movements of those who walked by, but never once offering even the slightest sign of hope. He had learned long ago that there was no use in drawing attention to himself. The younger dogs, with their bouncy energy and playful antics, were the ones who captured the hearts of visitors, and Chief had stopped trying. He had no interest in competing. To him, it felt like a futile effort. His days blended together into one long, endless stretch of waiting. Every now and then a potential adopter would approach his kennel, but their eyes would always pass over him, seeking the vibrant faces of puppies or the more active dogs who bounced on their paws. Chief remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the floor or on the few sparse pieces of straw that lined the back of his kennel. He was simply a shadow in a sea of living creatures, a quiet presence whose story went untold. The shelter staff had grown used to him. They didn't expect much from Chief anymore. He didn't react to the sound of food being poured into his bowl, nor did he show any interest in the occasional walks that were offered. He was, in their eyes, a hopeless case. An animal too old to start anew, too quiet to be noticed. Even the volunteers, those few who came to help walk the dogs and clean the kennels, rarely gave him a second look. But one day, everything changed. It wasn't a dramatic event or a life-altering moment. It was simply a quiet morning when Harper Lane, a woman in her early 30s with auburn hair pulled into a loose bun, walked into the shelter with her friend Jen. Harper wasn't looking for a dog that day. She had no intention of adopting one. She was merely accompanying Jen, who had been considering getting a dog for some time. As they passed the kennels, Harper's eyes swept over the familiar faces, puppies jumping excitedly, young dogs wagging their tails, and older dogs pacing back and forth. But then, if her gaze landed on the very last kennel, it was tucked into the corner where the light from the windows barely touched. And there, lying motionless against the cold concrete, was Chief. His eyes, though tired, held something that Harper couldn't quite name. A sense of sadness? A quiet yearning? She couldn't be sure, but something about his stillness tugged at her. While Jen continued to chat excitedly about the puppies in the next row, Harper found herself drawn to the older dog, the one no one seemed to notice. Chief's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment time seemed to slow. His gaze wasn't filled with the usual emptiness that most dogs in shelters carried. No, there was something more there. Something raw. Something human. Harper couldn't explain it. It was as if he was waiting for something, or perhaps someone. Jen called out to her, pulling her attention away from the old shepherd. But Harper lingered a moment longer, her heart inexplicably heavy. She knew she wasn't supposed to get attached. Not today. Not like this. But as she turned to walk away, she found herself looking back at him. She saw Chief again, lying in that same spot. But this time, there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. A silent plea. Harper shook her head, trying to shake off the feeling. She wasn't here for this, and she didn't have the space for another responsibility. But as the two women left the shelter, her thoughts kept drifting back to that old dog, who had been overlooked for so long. The following day was gray and rainy, a typical day in early fall. Harper Lane had woken up late, the weight of a restless sleep clinging to her as she sat at the edge of her bed. She had planned to spend the day sketching, losing herself in the lines and colors that so often brought her peace. Yet, her mind kept wandering back to Pineview Animal Shelter and the old German shepherd with the tired golden eyes. She couldn't get him out of her head. Chief. The name echoed in her mind, a quiet sound that seemed to tap at her heart. She didn't know why she was so drawn to him, why his image lingered long after she had left the shelter. Maybe it was because he seemed so out of place, so still, so unremarkable in a world that seemed to value everything but stillness. Harper sat at her kitchen table, the sound of raindrops tapping against the windows in the background. She'd been planning to have a quiet day, but instead, she found herself thinking of nothing but Chief. Without really thinking about it, she grabbed her raincoat and hurriedly shoved her things into a bag. She didn't even call Jen, who had been her companion the day before. Something inside her just knew she had to go back to Pineview, even though she didn't know why. The shelter was just a short drive away. Harper made her way through the familiar streets of Pineview, the rain blurring the scenery outside her car window. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling her back there, as though it wasn't just the dog who needed her. Maybe in some strange way, she needed him too. When Harper arrived, the shelter was quiet, with only a few staff members going about their routines. The smell of disinfectant, and dampness lingered in the air as she entered, the warmth of the indoor heating a stark contrast to the chill of the rain outside. She had only come yesterday, but everything about the place felt so familiar now, as though she had stepped into a world of waiting. She walked past the familiar rows of kennels, her eyes scanning the faces of the dogs. The puppies still looked eager for attention, their small tails wagging excitedly as they hopped in their cages. But today, Harper's eyes were drawn to the back corner again, to the kennel that housed the old German shepherd, the one who never moved, the one who had never been given a chance. Harper paused for a moment, and then with a quiet determination, she walked toward the kennel. She noticed the staff member on duty, a woman in her 40s with a tired face, glancing at her curiously. The woman must have recognized Harper from yesterday. "Back again?" the woman asked, her voice soft but skeptical. "I'm surprised you're interested in him. Chief hasn't moved in months, and honestly, we don't expect much from him. He's an old dog." Harper hesitated for a moment. She didn't know what she was expecting, or even what she was doing, but something inside her wanted to understand why Chief had been left behind for so long. She nodded slowly, watching as the woman unlocked the kennel and opened the door slightly. The smell of stale air and the muted sounds of the shelter filled the small space. Chief was lying in the same position as yesterday, his graying coat a stark contrast to the bright, youthful faces of the dogs in the other cages. He didn't move when Harper knelt down beside him, but his eyes, those tired, soulful eyes, seemed to lock onto hers all once again. "Don't get your hopes up," the shelter worker warned. "He doesn't respond to anyone. He won't even eat if we're watching him. It's like he's just given up." But Harper didn't feel like giving up. She couldn't quite explain why, but she couldn't walk away from this dog. Maybe it was because she recognized that same quiet resignation in herself. She had never shared this with anyone. But her life, too, had been filled with silence. After her epilepsy diagnosis 2 years ago, Harper had found herself retreating into a shell of sorts. She stopped going out as much, stopped doing things that used to bring her joy. She felt her own version of the quiet hopelessness that she saw in Chief's eyes. But today, there was something different. She couldn't walk away from the shelter without knowing, without at least trying. Harper gently placed her hand on the cool bars of Chief's kennel. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper as she spoke. "Hey there, Chief. I'm Harper. I'm here to keep you company. So, for a long moment, nothing happened. Harper's hand rested on the bars, and she simply waited. There was no grand gesture, no sudden tail wag, no dramatic shift in the atmosphere. But then she saw it. The smallest twitch of Chief's ear, just a slight movement, a subtle sign that he was aware of her presence. Harper smiled to herself. It was something. It was a connection, no matter how faint. She sat there for a long time, talking to Chief softly, telling him about the things she loved, about her artwork, about the walks she used to take with her childhood dog. The hours slipped by, and still, Chief didn't move. But his gaze never left her face. It was as if he was listening, just listening and nothing more. By the time Harper stood to leave, her legs stiff from sitting for so long, she knew one thing for sure. She would be back tomorrow. The rain had stopped by the time Harper made her way to the shelter the next day. The early autumn air was crisp, and there was a calmness in the world outside, as if nature itself was mirroring her own shift. Something had changed within her since the day before, something unspoken, but undeniable. She'd felt the quiet stirrings of a connection with Chief, the old German shepherd who had been overlooked for far too long. It was a bond that didn't require words, one that simply existed between them in the quiet of the shelter. Harper had arrived early, before the usual rush of visitors. She noticed the shelter was emptier, quieter than usual. The staff was going through the usual motions of cleaning and feeding, but there was an air of detachment that hung over the place. Everyone here seemed resigned to the way things were, as though it was just the way life worked. Some dogs got lucky. Some didn't. And Chief? Well, Chief was the unlucky one. She found him right where she had left him, lying still in his corner, as if time had frozen for him, just as it had for the others. But today, she didn't feel the same heaviness in her chest that she had felt the day before. There was something different in the air, something almost hopeful. She had never been much of a dog person, but Chief had managed to crawl under her skin in the brief moments they had shared. The shelter worker from yesterday was there too, giving her a questioning look as Harper moved toward Chief's kennel. "Back again?" she asked with a hint of disbelief, her hands frozen mid-motion as she was cleaning a nearby cage. "You know, Chief doesn't respond to anyone. We've tried. He's given up on people." Harper paused for a moment, her fingers brushing lightly against the cold bars of Chief's kennel. The silence between them seemed to stretch out. "I know," she said quietly, her voice tinged with something almost like understanding. "But I think maybe he's just waiting for someone to see him." The worker gave a small shake of her head, clearly skeptical, but not willing to argue. She turned back to her duties, leaving Harper alone with Chief. Harper knelt down in front of his kennel, just as she had the day before. She could feel the weight of the space between them, the years of neglect, the years of silence that had shaped him into this shell of a dog. Harper had never been one for making dramatic gestures or trying to force connections. She simply sat beside his kennel, her presence an offering, a simple act of kindness. She had brought with her a book, one of her favorites, a classic novel that she often read when she needed comfort. She wasn't sure why she had brought it, other than the fact that it felt right. She opened the book and began to read aloud softly, her voice calm and steady, filling the space with gentle words. Chief didn't move at first. He lay there, as he always had, his golden eyes watching her with a quiet, patient expression. Harper wasn't sure if he was listening, but she didn't care. She kept reading, the rhythm of the words soothing her, the act of speaking to him creating a strange sense of peace. As the minutes passed, something unexpected happened. As Harper saw it before she could fully comprehend what was happening. Chief's ear twitched just once, but it was enough. Harper's breath caught in her throat. It was such a small thing, but it felt like a sign. She wasn't sure what it meant, but it made her heart swell with a sense of accomplishment. He had acknowledged her. After so many months of nothing, there had been a response. however subtle. She continued reading, her voice soft and steady, as Chief's ear twitched again, a little more pronounced this time. Harper smiled to herself, encouraged by the small sign that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this after all. For the next half hour, she read to him, the sound of her voice filling the empty space of the shelter. She noticed, though, that Chief was no longer lying completely still. There was a slight shift in his posture, a subtle indication that he was no longer as rigid as before. It wasn't much, but it was something. His eyes followed her movements, a flicker of recognition in them, and that was enough to keep Harper coming back. The staff had warned her that Chief was too far gone. They said he wouldn't respond to anything, that he had given up. But Harper knew something else. Sometimes the most profound connections weren't the ones built on loud actions or showy gestures. Sometimes they were quiet, built slowly over time, nurtured by a presence that wasn't demanding or forceful. As the day drew to a close and Harper prepared to leave, she stood up from her spot on the floor, stretching her stiff legs. Chief remained in his corner, still as ever. But this time, there was a sense of calm that hadn't been there before. She was leaving, but she knew she would return. This wasn't a passing moment or a fleeting connection. This was the beginning of something real. Harper stood at the door of the shelter, glancing back one last time at Chief. His gaze met hers again, and for the first time, she saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't the emptiness she had seen before, but something far more fragile. It was the beginning of trust. The days blurred together as Harper continued her quiet visits to Pineview Animal Shelter. She returned every afternoon, just as she had promised herself. It wasn't a dramatic decision, nor was it an act of saving or rescuing. It was simply the growing need to be there for Chief, to see if the small connections they shared could turn into something more. She didn't know where it would lead, but she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward the old German shepherd. Chief, with his weary eyes and distant demeanor, seemed to have slowly begun to awaken from his own long silence. Each day, the distance between them shrank just a little bit more. Harper knew the staff was skeptical. The shelter worker in particular, who had first warned her about Chief, still shook her head whenever Harper arrived. "He won't move for anyone. He hasn't shown any interest in food for months. I think you're wasting your time." But Harper didn't see it that way. She didn't see the dog as someone to be fixed or to be made better. She saw him as someone who had endured so much, someone who needed time, patience, and quiet connection. She didn't expect miracles. She didn't expect him to change overnight, but in the small gestures, in the flicker of movement in his eyes, Harper began to believe that something was happening. Something important. Each time she sat by Chief's kennel, she read to him. She brought different books, always selecting ones with gentle, soothing narratives. Sometimes she would talk to him about her day, about her freelance work, about the things she had been drawing in her sketchbook. At first, it felt strange, like she was talking to an empty space. But the more she did it, the more natural it became. It was as though she was learning to communicate with him in ways words alone couldn't express. Harper noticed that Chief was responding to her in subtle yet significant ways. The first sign came when she brought him a piece of chicken, as the shelter had recommended. The staff had told her that he rarely ate when anyone was watching, but Harper didn't mind. She didn't care whether he ate or not. She just wanted to offer him the choice, to show him that he wasn't alone in the world anymore. At first, Chief remained motionless, as he always had, but after a few minutes, something caught Harper's attention, a small shift in his posture. She didn't want to get her hopes up, but she couldn't ignore the slight movement. His head raised just a little, his eyes focused on the food in front of him. And then, slowly, Chief took a hesitant step forward, nudging the chicken with his nose. It was a small action, but for Harper, it felt like a victory. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with pride. She reached through the bars of his kennel, gently scratching behind his ears. Chief's body stiffened at first, but then, just as Harper was about to withdraw, his tail moved. Just a fraction, but enough to show that he was aware of her touch. The next day, Harper returned with more chicken and a fresh blanket. She'd brought in blankets before, but she wasn't sure if he cared about them. She thought back to what the staff had told her about his past, how he had likely spent most of his life outdoors, in harsh conditions, and how, at his age, comfort was a foreign concept, but that didn't deter her. She wasn't looking for a grand gesture from Chief. She was looking for tiny signs, moments that would tell her that she hadn't been wrong to believe in him. As she sat by his kennel, she noticed that Chief was looking at her again, this time more intently. His eyes, though tired, held something. Curiosity, perhaps. She held up the blanket and softly spoke to him. "This is for you, Chief. It's warm. You can rest on it." Harper unfolded the blanket and draped it over the floor of his kennel. Chief watched her with an alert gaze, but he didn't move right away. For a moment it seemed like nothing had changed. But then, without warning, Chief shifted his weight and stood up. Slowly, cautiously, he approached the blanket. Harper's heart skipped a beat as she held her breath, watching him with anticipation. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as well, waiting for Chief to do something, anything. He stepped onto the blanket, his paws touching it carefully at first. Then, without further hesitation, he lay down. Curling up on the soft fabric, he settled into the new space, resting his head on his paws, eyes still watching Harper as if he were waiting for her to disappear. But she didn't move. She stayed where she was, smiling softly, her heart swelling with hope. Harper returned every day that week, and Chief's small but steady improvements continued. He began to wag his tail when she spoke to him, a hesitant movement at first, but a movement nonetheless. His posture started to shift, no longer as rigid and tense as it had been when she first met him. And each day, Harper found herself feeling more connected to him, as though their quiet bond was growing stronger with every visit. On the 5th day, something remarkable happened. As Harper sat by Chief's kennel, reading to him once again, she noticed a small but significant change. Chief had been lying on the blanket, but now he was standing up, his body moving in a way it hadn't for months. He took a few careful steps toward the front of the kennel, his eyes locked on Harper as though asking her for something. It wasn't a loud request. It wasn't a bark or a desperate whine. It was simply a look that made Harper's heart skip a beat. She gently reached for the kennel door, her fingers trembling slightly. As she unlocked it, Chief stepped forward again, this time closer to her, his body slightly tense but no longer filled with the same weight of resignation. He reached the door and stood there, looking up at her with those same tired, golden eyes. Harper's breath caught in her throat as she knelt down to meet him. There were no grand words needed. There was no need for anything to be said. "Do you want to come out?" Harper asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. And for the first time in 16 months, Chief took another step forward. Toward freedom, toward a new life. The decision to take Chief home had not been a quick one. Harper had come to the shelter every day for nearly a week, and she had watched him take slow, deliberate steps toward reclaiming his life. It had been a quiet, steady process, a series of small victories that made Harper's heart swell with hope. But even with all the progress Chief had made, Harper still wasn't sure what the next step would be. Could he truly adjust to a new life outside the shelter? Could she? There were so many uncertainties. That 5th day, when Chief had taken those few tentative steps towards the front of the kennel, something inside Harper clicked. She had never expected this. Never expected to feel so connected to this dog who had been left behind for so long. It wasn't just about the dog, though. It was about Harper, too. It was about healing from her own scars, finding solace in something or someone that understood the weight of silence, of abandonment. As Harper watched Chief stand in front of her, his eyes wide with cautious curiosity, she realized that he wasn't just taking a step forward. He was trusting her. He was giving her a chance. Just as she had been giving him one, she couldn't let him down. She knew in that moment that she wasn't leaving this shelter without him. "I'll take him," Harper said, turning to the shelter worker who had watched Chief's transformation from afar. The worker's eyes widened with surprise. "You're sure?" she asked, her voice skeptical but tinged with a strange hope. "You know he's older. He has health problems, and he's been through a lot. It might be harder for him than you think." Harper nodded, her gaze never leaving Chief. "I'm sure. I don't care about his age or his health. He deserves a chance." "And so do I." The worker didn't say anything more, but the faint smile on her face spoke volumes. Harper was given the adoption papers, and after what felt like hours of paperwork and formalities, she was finally able to bring Chief home. It wasn't the grand homecoming she had imagined. Chief didn't bound out of the shelter with excitement. Instead, he walked slowly by Harper's side, his tired eyes flicking from side to side, as though he were unsure of where they were going. The world outside the shelter was loud, bright, and full of things he had never seen. Harper noticed how he flinched when a car honked in the distance, and how his ears flattened at the sound of a loud motorcycle revving its engine. But despite his discomfort, Chief never pulled away from her. He stayed close, his presence solid and steady next to her. The drive to her apartment was quiet, Chief sitting still in the passenger seat, his golden eyes watching Harper, occasionally looking out the window as the world passed by. It wasn't until they arrived at her apartment that things truly began to shift. As Harper opened the door to her small, cozy apartment, she could see the uncertainty in Chief's eyes. He wasn't sure where to go or what to do next. The sound of the door creaking, the unfamiliar smells, the different space, all of it was overwhelming for him. Harper's heart ached for him. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't just about bringing him into her home. It was about him learning to trust again, about him feeling safe enough to let his guard down. Harper knelt down beside him, keeping her voice soft and gentle. "It's okay, Chief. This is your home now. You're safe here." Chief didn't respond at first. He just stood there, his body tense, his eyes scanning the room. Harper had expected this. She had known that the transition wouldn't be seamless. There were still so many things to overcome: sounds, smells, the sheer unpredictability of life. But Harper wasn't going to push him. She would let him move at his own pace, just as she had done at the shelter. It wasn't long before Chief began to explore. He cautiously sniffed the hardwood floors, pausing to investigate the corners of the living room, the shelves, and the kitchen. Harper had set out a soft bed in the corner for him, but Chief didn't seem to care much about it at first. Instead, he wandered through the apartment, his movements slow and deliberate, as though he were testing the space before settling in. Harper stayed close, but didn't crowd him. She wanted him to feel like he had a say in this new life, even though it was all unfamiliar. She made him some food, hoping he would eat, but there was no immediate sign of interest. Instead, Chief simply circled the room, stopping occasionally to look out the windows at the world beyond. As the hours passed, Chief seemed to grow more comfortable. He settled into a corner of the couch, his body curling up into a tight ball, his eyes slowly closing. Harper couldn't help but smile. She had seen this before, back at the shelter, how he would curl up in the corner, motionless and withdrawn. But now, it felt different. He was in a safe place. He was no longer a fixture of the shelter, forgotten and abandoned. He was here, with her. The first night was quiet. Harper slept on the couch, unsure of where Chief would go. But in the middle of the night, she woke up to find him at her side, his head resting on the edge of the couch, his eyes still awake and watchful. She didn't push him away. Instead, she reached out and gently stroked his head, It was a small thing, but to Harper, it meant everything. They were beginning again. Together, a new beginning. It had been a few weeks since Harper brought Chief home, and with each passing day, their bond deepened. The transition hadn't been easy for either of them, but it was a gradual one, and that was okay. Chief, still cautious and reserved, had begun to show signs that life was returning to him in small but significant ways. He no longer lay motionless all day, staring blankly into space. He would move around the apartment, sniffing the air, exploring the rooms, and occasionally taking short walks with Harper. The soft tail wags had become more frequent, his ears perking up whenever Harper spoke or called his name. Harper had been patient, giving him space to adjust, but she was also aware of the quiet joy that filled her heart each time Chief responded to her. It wasn't much. A flicker of recognition in his eyes, a slight wag of his tail, but it was everything. In those moments, she felt the connection between them growing stronger. It was as though, bit by bit, the Chief was remembering what it felt like to be loved and to be cared for. His silence, which once seemed like resignation, was now a peaceful presence, a shared understanding between them. But there was more to it than that. Harper, too, was changing. Caring for Chief had given her a sense of purpose she hadn't realized she needed. The isolation she had felt after her epilepsy diagnosis, those long, silent days spent in her apartment, afraid of what would happen if she were to seize alone, began to loosen its grip on her. Every morning when she woke up and saw Chief at her side, there was a sense of calm she hadn't experienced before. It wasn't that he could fix everything, but somehow, his presence filled a space in her life that had been empty for too long. The morning routine had become their quiet ritual. Harper would wake up early, and as she stood by the kitchen counter making her coffee, Chief would lumber over to her, his paws clicking gently against the hardwood floors. He would sit by her feet, his eyes watching her with an almost tender gaze, as if he knew she needed him there. Harper would glance down at him, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips, and softly stroke his head before heading out the door for their daily walk. The walks had become an important part of their day. In the beginning, Chief had hesitated at the door, unsure of the world outside. The bustling noises of the street, the scent of passing cars, and the unfamiliarity of the sidewalks were overwhelming for him. But little by little, he grew more comfortable. He began to walk with Harper, side by side, though still cautious, still watching his surroundings with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. He would often stop to sniff a bush or a lamppost, his nose twitching as he processed the world in a way he hadn't done in over a year. For Harper, these small victories, each step Chief took toward embracing his new life, were heartwarming. As the days turned into weeks, Chief's confidence grew. He began to engage more with Harper, seeking out her company when she was home. He would nudge her hand with his nose, asking for attention, or rest his head on her lap while she sat on the couch, watching TV. He still wasn't a particularly vocal dog, but his presence spoke volumes. He didn't need to bark to express his needs or desires. Harper had learned to read him, to understand his silent language. The tilt of his head, the way his tail swayed, and the way his eyes followed her every move. These were the signs that told her Chief was coming back to life. One evening, as Harper sat on the couch with her sketchbook open in front of her, she noticed Chief looking at her from the other side of the room. His golden eyes were fixed on her, and for the first time, he didn't look lost or distant. He looked connected. The way he gazed at her, almost with recognition, made Harper's heart swell. She had been drawing for a while when Chief slowly got up and padded over to her, sitting at her feet. He nudged her hand with his nose, a gentle reminder that he was there, wanting to share this moment with her. Harper looked down at him, smiling softly as she set her pencil down. "What's up, Chief?" she asked, her voice filled with warmth. Chief didn't answer in words, but he leaned against her legs, resting his head on her lap. Harper stroked his head absent-mindedly, her fingers working through the soft fur. It was a simple gesture, but it carried so much meaning. It was a gesture of trust, of mutual understanding. He was asking for nothing, only for her presence. In that moment, Harper realized just how far they had come. That evening, after their routine walk and dinner, Harper decided to give Chief a small surprise. She had been meaning to buy him a new toy, something he could enjoy during their quiet nights at home. It wasn't much, just a soft chew toy, something to add a bit of joy to his day, but it felt important. She placed it in front of him, her eyes full of excitement as she watched his reaction. Chief, ever so cautious, sniffed it tentatively before giving it a gentle nudge with his nose, and then, for the first time since she had brought him home, Chief did something unexpected. He picked up the toy with his teeth and trotted around the living room, a soft tail wagging behind him. Harper watched him, a smile spreading across her face. It was a simple thing, but it meant the world to her. It meant that Chief was beginning to enjoy life again, that he was starting to rediscover the joy that had been buried deep within him for so long. As the weeks passed, Harper noticed that Chief was becoming more expressive. He would bark lightly when someone knocked on the door, his tail wagging in excitement. He would wag his tail when Harper came home from work, his entire body wiggling with happiness. It was as though he had forgotten how to smile. But with Harper, he was learning again. He was learning that it was okay to trust, to live in the moment, and to accept love. In turn, Harper was learning to let go of the fears that had once kept her locked inside herself. The love she had found in Chief was a quiet, steady force, just like him. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't demand anything. It simply was. And that was enough. The evening had started like any other. Harper had prepared a quiet dinner for herself and Chief, their routine becoming a rhythm she cherished more than she expected. The evening was cool, and as Harper sat down on the couch to eat her dinner, Chief settled beside her, his head resting on her knee, as usual. He had become such a calm presence in her life, and she had grown so accustomed to his quiet companionship that it was hard to imagine a day without him. But that night, something felt different. Harper had been feeling a little off all day, a sense of unease she couldn't quite shake. The world seemed slightly out of focus, as though her mind was clouded. Maybe it was the stress from her recent freelance projects, or the isolation she had sometimes felt creeping back in. She hadn't had a seizure in a few months, but the fear always lingered, always present, like a shadow in the corner of her mind. As she sat there, absent-mindedly eating, she felt the familiar buzz of unease at the back of her head, that telltale sensation that warned her something wasn't right. Her heart began to race, her palms sweaty. It was happening. Her vision started to blur, and the familiar sense of dizziness overwhelmed her. Panic surged through her, but it was almost impossible to focus through the fog that clouded her mind. Before she could do anything, the world tipped sideways, and the floor beneath her seemed to vanish. Harper had experienced this before. The sensation of everything slipping away, the terrifying loss of control. It was the same as all the other times, but there was something different now. She wasn't alone. Chief was there. Through the fog of her vision, she saw him. The same steady gaze, his eyes now wide with what seemed to be a deep sense of concern. She could hear him moving closer to her, though the sounds felt muffled in her mind. His body pressed against hers, warm and solid, a constant anchoring presence in a world that had suddenly spun out of control. Harper tried to fight the dizziness, tried to reach for something to hold on to, but her muscles refused to respond. The world became a blur of colors and sounds, and then nothing. Her body went limp. It was the worst moment she could remember, losing control, knowing she was powerless to stop it. But Chief wasn't just standing by. As Harper fell to the ground, her body seizing, Chief immediately sprang into action. Harper's mind was swimming in and out of awareness, the intense confusion and helplessness of the moment overwhelming her. But even in her disorientation, she felt something. Something warm and steady pressing against her, urging her to focus. Chief was there, pushing his body against hers, nudging her as though trying to keep her from hitting her head on the floor. He was trying to keep her safe. Through the haze, Harper could feel his warm, heavy body beside hers. She heard the sharpness of his barks, loud and insistent, the sound of him trying to get her attention, to bring her back. His movements were urgent but gentle, never leaving her side, never giving up. He was her protector. He was there when no one else could be. Time seemed to stretch, each second dragging on as Harper fought to regain her senses. Chief stayed close, his body pressed against her as though offering some sort of comfort, grounding her in a way she could not explain. He didn't leave. He didn't back away. He stayed with her. Gradually, the world began to re-enter focus, slowly coming back into view, though it still seemed distant, like looking through a fogged-up window. The first thing Harper noticed was the sound of Chief's breathing, steady and rhythmic. He was still there, still beside her. His warmth was reassuring, his presence more than just a comfort. It was a lifeline. As her mind began to clear, Harper slowly became aware of her body, still trembling from the seizure. She tried to move, but everything felt sluggish, as if she were submerged in water. But Chief didn't stop. He continued nudging her gently with his nose, his eyes full of concern. He stayed by her side, watching her every movement with care, his body a steady presence, unwavering in the storm that had just passed through her. Harper managed to sit up slowly, her hands trembling as she touched her forehead. She felt dizzy and disoriented, but there was something else, something more important. Chief was still there, and that meant everything. "Chief," she whispered, her voice raw and shaky. "You're here. You're really here." The dog looked up at her, his golden eyes meeting hers with an almost knowing gaze. There was no judgment, no rush to move on. He simply stayed with her, his head resting against her side, as if to say, "I've got you." Harper's heart swelled with emotion. This was more than just a dog. Chief wasn't just her companion. He was her protector, her constant in a world full of unpredictability. He had stayed with her, even when she was at her most vulnerable, even when she couldn't help herself. Tears pricked at the corners of Harper's eyes as she reached down to stroke his fur, the soft warmth of his body against hers grounding her. "Thank you," she whispered through the tears, unable to find any other words to express what she was feeling. "You saved me, Chief." Chief gave a soft, almost inaudible whine, nuzzling her hand as though to reassure her that he was there. He hadn't just been a dog, waiting for attention. He had been more than that. He had been a lifeline when Harper needed one the most. For the first time in months, Harper allowed herself to lean into the comfort of Chief's presence, letting herself truly feel the depth of their bond. She had come to think of him as her protector, but now she realized just how much they needed each other. They weren't just giving each other second chances. They were giving each other something more precious, a kind of connection that went beyond words or actions. It was trust, loyalty, and the quiet strength of two souls who had been waiting for the other to show up. And that night, as Chief stayed by her side, Harper knew that they both had found something they hadn't even known they were searching for. The days after Harper's seizure were a mixture of relief and profound realization. Chief had done more than just stay by her side. He had protected her in a way that no one else had. His loyalty was beyond anything Harper had expected, and his unwavering presence had given her a strength she hadn't known she possessed. It wasn't just a dog's affection. It was something far deeper, something that anchored her when she felt herself slipping away. As Harper recovered, she found herself reflecting on how much Chief had changed her life. His quiet demeanor, which she had once thought to be a sign of neglect, had transformed into a testament of patience and resilience. Chief had been through so much in his life, yet there he was, offering everything he had to her. His journey mirrored her own, two lost souls finding each other when they least expected it. It wasn't long before Harper knew she needed to share their story. She wasn't a writer or an influencer, but she felt compelled to do something, to show the world what Chief had given her, to make sure that others knew that love, patience, and second chances weren't just about finding the right dog. They were about finding the right bond, the right connection. No matter how quiet or broken it seemed, Harper sat down one evening, her laptop open before her. She typed the words slowly, carefully, as if crafting a letter to the world. She began to write about Chief, about the dog, who had been passed over time and time again, the dog no one had noticed, but who had become her constant companion, her protector, and her teacher. She wrote about how Chief had helped her through her darkest moment, about how his simple presence had given her a sense of calm and purpose. As Harper typed, she realized that her story wasn't just about a dog. It was about something much bigger. It was about the silent heroes in our lives, the ones who don't demand attention but offer it freely. It was about second chances, not just for the dogs who had been abandoned or neglected, but for the people who needed to heal, who needed to learn to trust again. When Harper hit send on her post, she didn't expect much. She shared it on her social media, hoping it would resonate with a few people who understood what she was trying to say. It was a simple post, but it felt important. It felt like the beginning of something. Little did she know, it was the beginning of something much larger than either she or Chief could have imagined. The response was immediate. Messages poured in from people who had adopted senior dogs, who had experienced the same quiet bond with their pets. There were messages from people who had never considered adopting older dogs, but who now felt compelled to do so. There were also messages from people who had been inspired by Chief's story to reach out to shelters and adopt dogs in need, particularly senior dogs who often went unnoticed. Harper was overwhelmed by the response, but there was one message in particular that stood out. It came from a woman named Maria, who had seen Harper's post and was moved by it. Maria had been working at Pineview Animal Shelter for several years, and she was one of the staff members who had cared for Chief during his time there. In her message, Maria explained how she had always believed in Chief's potential, but she had never been able to find the right person for him. She had watched as Chief had spent months, even years in that shelter, always passed over for younger, more energetic dogs. But when she read Harper's story, she said something in her heart had shifted. She realized that Chief had always needed someone who could see beyond the surface, someone who would understand the quiet strength that lay beneath his still exterior. Maria's message was a reminder to Harper of how far they had come, not just as a team, but as individuals who had learned to trust again. Chief wasn't just a rescue dog. He was a living testament to the power of love, patience, and the quiet moments that defined their bond. Harper felt a rush of gratitude as she read Maria's words. It was a reminder that there were many others like Chief, dogs who'd been overlooked, neglected, and left behind, but who still had so much to offer if only someone would take the time to see them. Soon after, Harper decided to do something to give back to Pineview Animal Shelter, the place where everything had begun. She reached out to Maria and the shelter's staff to discuss ways to raise awareness about senior dog adoption. Together, they brainstormed ideas, and before long, they had created a campaign called Second Son, an initiative designed to help older dogs find their forever homes. Harper became the face of the campaign, using her own story to inspire others to open their hearts to senior dogs. She started visiting local libraries, senior centers, and even epilepsy awareness events, sharing Chief's journey and advocating for older dogs who were often passed over for younger, more energetic puppies. Chief, always calm and composed, became the perfect ambassador for the campaign. He would sit quietly by Harper's side, offering comfort and reassurance to everyone he met. He became a symbol of resilience and hope, showing people that love didn't have to be loud or flashy. It just had to be steady and true. As the campaign gained traction, Harper noticed something incredible happening. People from all walks of life started reaching out to her. Families, seniors, young professionals, each one wanting to adopt a senior dog, each one moved by the story of Chief and the lessons he had taught her. Harper realized that Chief's legacy wasn't just about him. It was about creating a movement, a shift in how people viewed older dogs and, in turn, how they viewed themselves. One day, as Harper sat in her living room with Chief by her side, she thought back to that first day at the shelter, when she had almost walked away. If she had, she would never have known the incredible journey they would take together. She wouldn't have known the depth of love that could bloom from quiet moments and the healing that could come from just being present with someone without expectation. Harper glanced down at Chief, who was resting his head on her lap, and smiled. They had both been given second chances, one that would change their lives forever. And now they were sharing that gift with others. The Second Son initiative had quickly grown into something much larger than Harper had imagined. What had started as a simple campaign to raise awareness about senior dog adoption quickly blossomed into a movement, bringing together people who were passionate about giving older dogs a chance at a new life. Chief, now affectionately known as the Heart Watcher by many, became the face of this campaign. His journey had inspired so many, and now he was leading the charge to help other senior dogs find homes and to teach people the true meaning of unconditional love. Harper was humbled by the outpouring of support from the community. Every day, she received messages from people who had adopted senior dogs or were in the process of adopting. There were countless success stories from families who had found joy and companionship in their older pets. And Harper couldn't help but feel proud of the role Chief had played in sparking this change. The campaign was about more than just finding homes for older dogs. It was about changing perceptions and challenging the belief that age meant less love. Chief, with his calm presence and quiet strength, had proven that love had no age limit. Harper began to partner with local shelters, senior centers, and libraries to spread the word about senior dog adoption. They visited schools and local businesses, speaking at events, and raising awareness about the joys of adopting an older dog. Chief, who had once been passed over, was now the center of attention wherever they went. His steady presence brought comfort to those who needed it most, especially children, the elderly, and people with disabilities. It was at a senior center event held in a warm, sunlit room filled with elderly visitors that Harper realized just how profound Chief's impact was. As they walked into the room, Chief immediately settled down by a group of senior citizens, many of whom had been longing for a pet but couldn't care for a younger, more energetic dog. Chief, ever the gentle soul, laid down at their feet, his body relaxed, his eyes soft and calm. The seniors, drawn to his quiet demeanor, began to pet him, their faces lighting up as they made the connection. For some, it had been years since they had felt the joy of having a dog by their side, and Chief brought that joy back into their lives with nothing more than his presence. Harper watched as Chief interacted with the elderly, and his calming energy soothing their worries and brightening their day. She could see how much the simple act of petting him brought comfort to these seniors. For them, Chief wasn't just a dog. He was a reminder of companionship, of love that didn't ask for anything in return. As Harper looked around the room, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what Second Son was all about, giving people who had so much love to give the chance to share it with a dog who had lived through hardship and still had so much to offer. At the end of that event, as Harper and Chief packed up to leave, a woman in her late 70s came up to them. She had a cane, her steps slow and measured, but her eyes were full of warmth. As she approached Chief, "I don't know if you know this, but you're doing something beautiful here," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "You're giving us the chance to love again." Harper's heart swelled as she looked at Chief, who was now sitting patiently by the woman's side. "We're just getting started," Harper replied, her voice thick with gratitude. "Chief is the real hero here. The woman smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He's not the only one," she said softly, her gaze shifting to Harper. "You are, too." As Harper and Chief left the senior center that day, Harper felt the weight of the responsibility she had taken on. This was no longer just about her and Chief. It was about something much bigger. It was about creating a space for people to share their love and make a difference, about giving older dogs a second chance and showing the world that it was never too late to start over. It was about breaking down the barriers that kept people from adopting senior dogs, showing them that an older dog could bring just as much joy, love, and companionship as a younger one. Harper and Chief continued to visit different locations across the city: libraries, schools, and community centers. Chief was always calm, his presence never demanding, but somehow always the center of attention. People were drawn to him, to his stillness, to the way he seemed to have lived through so much and yet remained kind and gentle. He became the face of the Second Son campaign, visiting senior centers where people with disabilities often needed the quiet comfort of an animal. His ability to connect with people, especially those who were struggling, was profound. At a local library event, Harper spoke to a group of children about adopting older dogs. As she talked about Chief's journey, she looked out at the young faces, many of them listening with wide eyes, hanging on every word. Chief lay beside her on the floor, a calm, steady presence. One by one, the children came up to pet him, their tiny hands brushing his fur. Harper noticed that some of them looked at Chief as if they saw something beyond the surface, a dog who had been through so much, yet still had so much love to give. The children's parents began asking questions, asking how they could adopt senior dogs or help with the cause. The shift in their mindset was tangible. What began as an effort to give Chief a second chance had blossomed into a ripple effect, creating a community of people who wanted to make a difference for older dogs. In the weeks that followed, more shelters began to take part in the Second Son campaign. They started to feature older dogs who had been overlooked, giving them the spotlight they deserved. Senior dogs who had been waiting for homes for years were now finding families, thanks to the collective effort of Harper, Chief, and all those who believed in the power of second chances. As the movement spread, Harper couldn't help but think back to that first day she had walked into the Pineview Animal Shelter. Chief had been lying there, unnoticed, neglected by so many, but she had seen something in his eyes that no one else had. It was the same thing she saw in every dog now: hope. Hope that with a little patience, a little love, and a lot of trust, their world could change. And just like that, the quiet, forgotten dog who had been left behind became the symbol of something that changed countless lives. Something that started with one woman, one dog, and one small act of kindness. Chief had given Harper a second chance, and together they were giving it to so many others. The years passed quietly but steadily, with Harper and Chief continuing their shared mission to change the world, one senior dog at a time. The Second Son initiative had grown into a movement that transcended its humble beginnings. Harper had partnered with shelters, rescue organizations, and veterinary clinics across the country to spread the message of second chances. And Chief, now a well-known symbol of resilience, became the face of the campaign. His story, once just one of survival and quiet dignity, was now one of hope and inspiration. Through the campaign, Chief's legacy reached far beyond what Harper had imagined. More people were adopting older dogs. More shelters were prioritizing the elderly dogs that had once been overlooked, and more awareness was being raised about the importance of senior dog adoption. Chief's calm and gentle demeanor had brought comfort to so many, and his story had touched lives in ways Harper could not have dreamed when she first walked into Pineview Animal Shelter. But through it all, there was one constant: Chief. No matter how much the campaign grew, no matter how many people sent their thanks or shared their stories of adopting older dogs, it was always Chief who remained the quiet hero at the center of it all. As the years went by, Harper began to notice subtle changes in Chief. His steps, once so steady and strong, had begun to slow. His fur, once soft and thick, now carried more gray than gold. The once playful spark in his eyes had dimmed slightly, and his energy had become more subdued. Harper knew that Chief was growing older, just as she herself was. They had been through so much together, and now they were facing the inevitable truth that all life, no matter how strong, must eventually come to an end. But for Harper, Chief had never been just a dog. He had been her companion, her protector, and her teacher. He had given her strength when she had none, hope when she had lost it, and love when she thought she didn't deserve it. Now, as Chief entered his later years, Harper felt the weight of knowing that their time together was limited. One warm summer evening, as Harper sat on the porch with Chief curled up beside her, she reflected on everything they had accomplished. The shelter visits, the speaking engagements, the way Chief had transformed from a forgotten dog in a shelter to a symbol of hope for so many. Harper's heart swelled with pride, but there was also a deep sadness that lingered in her chest. She knew that Chief was nearing the end of his journey, and that thought was a difficult one to accept. One evening, Harper took Chief to the vet for a routine checkup. The vet confirmed what they had both known deep down. Chief's health was declining. His joints were painful, his movements slower, and his energy was waning. The vet explained that Chief was showing signs of aging, and while his heart was still strong, his body was starting to show the toll of years of living. There would be no immediate danger, but the time to say goodbye was drawing nearer. Harper's heart broke. But she knew that Chief had lived a full life, one that had been rich with meaning, filled with love and purpose. His legacy would live on in the countless dogs that had been adopted because of the campaign he had inspired, in the people who had learned to open their hearts to older dogs, and in the families who had found joy in their senior pets. Chief had given so much to the world, and Harper knew that his journey had been more than just about survival. It had been about love. The following months were spent savoring every moment with Chief. Harper took him on slow walks through the park, let him rest in the sunlight that filtered came through the trees, and made sure that he was always by her side. There were days when he still wagged his tail, when he seemed to have a spark of energy, and Harper cherished those moments. But she also knew that the time was coming when they would have to say goodbye. One peaceful evening, as the sun began to set, Harper sat with Chief on the porch. His head rested in her lap, his golden eyes looking up at her with the same trust and love that he had shown her all those years. She gently stroked his fur, whispering soft words of gratitude for everything he had given her. Chief had been her anchor in a world that sometimes felt too heavy, and now it was her turn to give back to him. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Chief took his last breath, his body relaxing in Harper's arms. The house, which had been filled with the quiet presence of his love for so long, now felt empty. But Harper didn't feel sadness alone. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that Chief had lived a life that was full of meaning and that his legacy would continue in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by his story. In the days that followed, Harper reflected on the incredible bond they had shared. Chief had never asked for anything in return. He had simply been there, steady and strong, through the highs and the lows. He had taught her that love didn't need to be loud or dramatic. It simply needed to be present. Harper knew that the Second Son campaign would continue. It had become bigger than just Chief and her. It had become a movement, a reminder to the world that love didn't ask for perfection, that second chances were always worth taking, and that even the quietest souls had the power to change the world. And Chief, though gone, would forever be a part of that legacy. Years later, when Harper would speak about Chief, she would always end with the same words. He was never broken. He was just waiting for someone to see him. And through the Second Son movement, through the lives of the dogs he helped, Chief's quiet heroism would never be forgotten.